Hello and welcome to the Ospreys Eyrie, a rugby podcast that will soon have an extra baby, but not in this call, not in this room. James is missing. You may be noticing this is not his voice. This is the voice of the other one who sometimes drones on. I am Robbie, or whatever you want to call me. I am joined today, delightfully, as ever, by Iestyn. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all good. It felt really weird having an email from Squidge Rugby. It just came up in my inbox thinking, what have I done? But then I realized, oh, wait, that's just the Zoom meeting. So, yeah, I'm all good. Still yes, I like to say. But yeah, all good.
It was, yeah, you're really close to deadline now, aren't you?
Yeah, there's like two over the next two over the next week. There's one on Friday, there's one next Tuesday, and then that's like 99% of it's done. There's like a PowerPoint presentation in the middle of May, like a day before the Dragons game. And then that's like everything done for the second year, which is rather scary because, yeah, I don't know how I'm in second year already. Time kind of like flies at
I,
times.
I'm almost 10 years on from graduating. I don't know how that's happened. It'll catch up with you. It'll happen. I don't know how I'm at the start of second year. Never mind. So far on. And delighted to be joined by the one and only Harry Thompson, the other person I met after winning at Walford Road. Um, so I met Iestyn on the way down the stairs, and at the bottom of the stairs, I met yourself, Harry. How are you doing? Good to have you.
Yeah, I'm good. I just about remember that. Yeah, hello everyone. My name's Harry. Long time listener, first time caller. If you want good, astute analysis of the rugby stuff, you'll have to listen to Robbie and Iestyn. I'm very much a drink a beer with the rugby kind of person. Have too strong and too confident opinions. So, but I do just about remember the Leicester game and meeting you afterwards. Yeah.
So I want to do a quick intro just to get people up to speed, maybe listening. And then I suppose we might as well answer the same questions afterwards because they are brand new. So favorite Osprey brackets uncapped, favorite Osprey brackets capped of all time, and favorite. Let's go Ospreys. We say game or moment.
Ooh, that's a really
Putting
tricky
you on the
one.
spot.
Favorite Ospreys player of all time. I think I got to go Dan Bigger because I think
Okay.
it's just I think we were based for so long on just having really good quality international fly halves, and I think even though we're kind of building in that Spence now, we've missed it ever since. I think the
Mm.
scrum's better than it's ever been, and I think that top quality international fly half I really miss. So I'll say Dan Bigger. In terms of my all-time favorite Ospreys moment, do you know what? It might be Leicester actually.
Yeah.
We were just saying before we started recording that I'm a big supporter of the URC. I kind of watch the Ospreys just to have fun, just to drink beers with my friends. I've been a lifelong sort of a fan. Um, so I try and just enjoy it and not get too much involved in sort of the where we've got terrible referees or where the league doesn't work and things like that. But we were just saying there's something really special about the sort of Anglo-Welsh away clashes. We've got a group of us that kind of have season tickets together and we'll go on the away trip. And there's just something. The Sarries one was really good as well because you did the big.
Mm.
It wasn't international, but you kind of did the traditional like uh trip down on the train to London, Welsh fans, a chair for the beers, but obviously we lost, it didn't go away. But that Leicester one was incredible just because of the atmosphere. We just went there. We loudly supported the Ospreys. There were loads of other really good fans there too. I think we were kind of supporting them ironically, with the sense that we were going to lose all the way through, and that our loud support was going to be rubbed in our faces by the Tigers fans, and then we just ended up winning it in the last couple of moments. So I think that was one of my all-time rugby memories, I got to say.
Mm.
Obviously, we've had objectively higher moments with the league wins and winning, the final away in Dublin and things like that, and all those obvious ones. But I have to say, for me, the favourite ever win, I think I got to say it's that Leicester one, yeah.
Mm. I think honestly, right up there for me as well. Like having grown up as a Ospreys fan in the East Midlands, everyone I knew that liked rugby was a Tigers fan.
Yeah.
And I've seen the Ospreys play at Walford Road more than I have seen them play at the Liberty or the Swansea.com now. So, and they'd never won there. So that was kind of a moment I waited for a long time. Yes, Tim, can I ask the same question?
Well, no, I really want to be really boring and say the same game, but I'm not. Even though one of the best memories of just me and my dad in the car eating Kit Kat about 1 a.m. when we eventually got home. And I have to think of a game on the fly now. It could be anything. This could be oh
There's so many good ones,
trying to
especially
think
recently.
trying to think of one from a few years ago and only when I started to get into it. Oof.
Because there is quite a blank spot, the kind of Alan
Yeah.
Clark blank spot.
um
And we obviously had that season where we only had 2 wins, so that reduces
Yeah,
the number as well.
2019. Well, I don't know why, but 2019-20's gone to the front of my head for no apparent reason. And uh, it's a bit of a weird one, but I think it was like Dragons Away from 2021. It was like the
Hmm.
first season all the fans were kind of like back in. And
Oh yeah.
obviously the Ospreys never win the Rodney Parade, do they? But this weird occasion they did. And yeah, Michael Collins scored a brace on debut that
Yes.
that game, and Luke Morgan scored a decisive try despite a late Dragons comeback. It's probably not my favorite game of all time. I think there's probably others like games you've watched on the telly. I highly rate Montpellier away in Europe
Oh
from
yeah, that was good.
the same
Yeah.
season against Leicester. That's probably in the mix. So, but yeah, it's like a bit of like a recent memory, just like getting back in from COVID.
Yeah.
That was like the first like real game. So yeah, that's probably up there. But like personally, but there's probably a lot of Ospreys games I've missed, and there's people gonna be shouting at me saying, "Why haven't you got this game?" But in reality, Munster 2016-17 stuck in my head for no apparent reason.
And more on that later. However, right, there is a little Stormers game that we need to talk about. How are we all feeling post quite the win, quite the incredible win at the weekend?
I was just saying before we started recording again, I was just refreshing myself on it and watching the second half again right before we started, and I was getting hyped up watching it again. I was just saying I didn't actually watch it live. Classic. It's the one I didn't get. I was on holiday with my girlfriend in Barcelona. It was the last night of the holiday, so we were sat out on the street and and that kind of took over the evening, me trying to get WhatsApp updates from my friends because I couldn't load the game on my phone. Uh, but it was just awesome. Like it was in terms of how I'm feeling, it was just such an intense performance. I was also just saying before we started that sometimes when you see those sort of you see these Welsh sides who go against South Africa and New Zealand and they don't think they can win, and then the confidence builds at the end, and then they realise they can if they're close enough. And it actually didn't feel like that at all. It felt like
Hmm.
the Ospreys just believed right from the start they could win, which is a pretty immense thing from a group of young players like that. But I think it's maybe partially like Toby Booth says, they don't have the scars, they don't know the losses, they just go out there and believe in themselves and they win. So um, I'm always a pessimist when I think about the Ospreys. We've seen that, and I still think we get smashed by the Bulls, but they just keep proving me wrong. I thought we had absolutely no chance, and they just played in such an incredible way with so much heart and passion. Yeah, I'm really really pumped after just watching a bit of it there and refreshing myself.
Iestyn?
Yeah, my glass half empty attitude towards Welsh rugby was exposed again. I didn't fill out my Super Brew predictions for one, as I forgot, which is a bit of a kick in the teeth. But it probably saved me of an incorrect answer, if I'm being brutally honest, because I didn't really expect a win out in South Africa. But you tend to see sides, especially way out there, you think, oh, right, they've started well, they pinch an early try, and then you kind of see the opposition get back into it.
Hmm.
And the Stormers kind of did that when they scored that try from the line out. But then you just expect that the power and the sheer athleticism of the Stormers to kind of like get on top, but it kind of didn't.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was the pleasing thing to begin with. Then Sampari scores, and you're thinking, right, that if we're still in this, is a bit of a chance. Then Manny Libok tries this crossfield kick with about 10 seconds before half time. For whatever reason, I'm not so sure why, but I think probably only Manny Libok can really answer that question. And Jack Welch reads it beautifully and puts in Luke Morgan. And you're thinking that was a really crucial time to get a score in as well.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
despite Leibok's excellence at the start of the second half by putting in Ivan Roots with that little loop, it kind of felt like every time they'd got into the 22, and Robbie's been on record about this, about sides maybe not taking points on offer. And the Stormers fell into that category, well, in the first half, let alone the second half. And credit to the Ospreys defence. And they did so well, especially in that last 20 minutes. You thought, right, Deves has scored, but there's still a little bit of pressure because if the Stormers got a quick try, it's game on all of a sudden. And to defend so remarkably for up until the clock went red, and then unfortunately give away that penalty try at the end, which gave them a losing bonus point. And you could see like the attitude from the squad that Toby Booth said post match. There's a couple of players walking off that were disappointed to give them the losing bonus point at the end of the game. So you're thinking, that attitude shift from a few years ago, like I mentioned, the 2019-20 season where the Ospreys only won 2 games, which is still crazy to think 5 years on from now. The Ospreys go into a game this weekend with a chance of a clean sweep against South African oppositions in the ORC and 5 wins in one season against South African oppositions. It's absolutely mental.
Insane. To say they hadn't won a game in the URC year against the South African side at the start of the season, to then going to almost potentially looking at a clean sweep this weekend. But it's like, the pair of you were saying there was a sheer kind of intensity to them. I think on Saturday, there was a moment within the first 5 minutes where I kind of thought there's a chance we might win this even before the Luke Morgan score, because the way they were flying up in defense and how accurate they were in attack and how switched on they looked felt like a team who were going to go on and win. It didn't feel like a team that turned up to get pumped, but maybe try and get a bonus point along the way, as was the case last year in South Africa, as we were kind of led to believe might be the case this year. I think we were probably, I think we were talking last week, but we would have been quite happy if we'd come out of that game with a try bonus point and that was it. Yeah. And then suddenly, somewhere in that first kind of 10 minutes, I've just watched that first 10 minutes back, and how accurate they are and how fired up they are and how intense it is just suddenly felt like, oh no, we'll be gutted to lose this. And in the end, there was no need to worry. That, again, watching those early stages back, just how good Dan Edwards was before he had to go off. You quietly, Harry Deves, I thought, was unbelievable all game long, as he so often is. Watching it a second time, you start to realize I've been on the Owen Watkin Player of the Season hype train, and Harry Deves is quietly coming from behind to sneak that. Morgan Morris remains favourite for like a 17th year in a row. But watching it back, like, Watkin was fantastic in a way that perhaps you didn't notice as much first time around, but has been quietly brilliant all season, and that was another performance for it. But yeah, just absolutely brilliant. And it kind of felt like the model performance which they can build off and which they can look to as, this is the standard we can hit every week. Because I think the Leicester game we mentioned, the Montpellier game we mentioned, and old games against the Scarlets, they've shown what they can do when they're at 10 out of 10. And this was a performance in which they didn't have to be at a kind of huge emotional high in the way they were against Sale. Or there were, even the game against the Lions was a bit of a fluke where they kind of pulled it out the fire at the last second. The one in January, not the recent one. And this felt like a level they can achieve on a fairly regular basis that is still good enough to be beating a team who has only lost to 3 teams in the URC era at home ever.
I gotta say as well, it's just one of those things that makes you absolutely love sport in general, doesn't it? And it's so nice that it's our team that's creating these stories, because they've just got absolutely no right to do it, do they? With the way the budgets are, and it's players who haven't had a huge amount of international experience. You've got your Ratties and your Suttons and things like that, going away to South Africa, and was it 100% scrum completion, 3 scrum penalties, and Ben Warren comes on the 54th minute, and then we win a scrum penalty again, and then there's the try that follows on after that, because their scrum's going backwards so much with where Welsh rugby is and the budgets, and the lack of exposure to some of these Ospreys players to international rugby, that they just have absolutely no right to go and play like that in South Africa and win. So it's just you watch sport and you're a fan of this stuff for these storylines, for these kind of underdog stories, and it's just me and my friends that we're on a full season ticket now, and when we got our season tickets, it was kind of when they were talking about the merger, and it was a use it or lose it kind of thing. And we referred to it at the start as the Ospreys tax. It's like our time to pay for our season ticket for the Ospreys tax and go and watch us lose every week, because otherwise we might fold and close. So what Tui Booth has done and what all these players have done to turn us around in a few short seasons that we're getting results like this, it's just absolutely immense. It's just so good, isn't it? It's nice.
Yeah. We've accidentally skipped the news, but we'll come back to that. That's fine. We don't need news. In fact, there is almost no news. The news is James Fender signed a new contract, which is great. And I think we're all very happy with, broadly.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's good news, especially with a few rumours that were floating around. So it's very good news that he's staying put.
Yeah. There are rumours that he was off to France, but his agent suggests that he's better staying put. So he signed a new contract there. And also rumours about the Scarlets, as previously discussed on this podcast. So yeah, really good to keep hold of him. And then Kieran Hardy's come in as the other, big signing for next season, I suppose. Probably the highest profile signing we've had so far for next season. But I should mean more people have heard of him than Will Greatbanks. No disrespect to Will Greatbanks, who I'm assured is incredibly famous in France. And yeah, I would say these a kind of perfect fit for this squad in terms of the type of player, the profile of player, and the budget range we can afford.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting signing, because I've been really impressed by Ruben Morgan-Williams as well. I think we got some good scrum halves. It'd be interesting to see who kind of emerges in that battle too, because I think all three of the ones that we tend to use are really good. You kind of imagine, because he's obviously got the most international experience. Obviously, Pivac was trying to use him all the time, wasn't he? So I just think it'll be really interesting to see where he sort of falls in the pecking order. And scrum halves are potentially, would you say, they're the most competitive position on the pitch in some ways? I suppose you've got the props as well, but it'll be really interesting to see that sort of scrap for the position between the three of them. And yeah, it's a really interesting signing, I think, because you almost feel that we didn't necessarily need it. We felt secure at scrum half anyway, so it's a real luxury signing in some ways. So yeah, really interested to see how that one turns out. And congratulations to Kieran Hardy on his promotion.
I think it's a great move for him, getting more game time, not having the fear of not being in the matchday 23, which was, on the running at times, the Scarlets. And also it's a team that better suits his skill set. I know for a fact that members of the England backroom staff a few years ago were jealously looking at him as the kind of scrum half they'd have wanted, that he, would have been in there, just because he's one of the most accurate box kickers out there by their kind of metrics, which is really promising for, a team that kicks off 9 an awful lot, as the Ospreys do. And I think it's a really good move also for Ruben Morgan-Williams in the way that he's had a season as undisputed first choice, having been second choice behind Rhys Webb for a few years. He's had a year to stamp his authority, show what he can do, and he is the number one, but he's got someone who would expect to be number one coming in alongside him. And it's probably really good for his development to now have that push, having had a year of just being backed outright.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting, that competition, because it's Ruben Morgan-Williams. He's still young, isn't he? But it'd be interesting to see if he can start to compete for a Wales jersey, because I think he kind of wasn't there before this season, wasn't he? You would have said it's a bit pie in the sky, him getting selected for Wales. But I think, a couple of the Ospreys players, you wonder why they're not getting picked up, but maybe it'll change in the next sort of set of internationals. But he's probably not one the top of the list of one of ours to get picked up, but I think he's getting closer and closer, isn't he? And I think if some of these Ospreys players do start getting picked up, then there's something to be said in terms of keeping players from clubs and regions together at an international level as well. So it'd be really interesting to see if he can win that battle to be Ospreys scrum half, then he's definitely in contention for Wales selection as well, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. The only other piece of news is that Jack Morgan is absolutely in love with a giraffe. And I don't know if any of you follow this on basically the full squad social medias today. They've been visiting a wildlife sanctuary of some sort, and I've never seen a man happier than Jack Morgan looking at a giraffe in 3 separate photos.
I did see it. I was surprised they let them back into the safari parks after Scott Baldwin's experience there, but they kept them next to the herbivores this time. So yeah, it's good to see them doing it, isn't it? And it's very nice. Just the team bonding as well. You can see they got a really good culture in the team. And I don't know if you caught Toby Booth's sort of post-match press conference where he's talking about. Well, he was talking about having 2 weeks away from the wife, wasn't he? And then he tried to roll back on his comments, but he said it was a very good. It was just good to have some time together with the squad, and you can see that, and it's almost like a mini tour, isn't it? So yeah, nice to see.
Yeah, and again, saying that they really value time together, and that's clear. And again, that just them playing cards together, and yeah, running on here. And Alex Cuff was saying on the Scrum 5 pod that he reckons they'll probably train twice this week and have a lighter week and just enjoy each other's company and have a more relaxed time to recover from the game and prepare for the next one, rather than flogging them and trying to drill too much in.
Yeah, definitely. Well, they worked hard in that last game, didn't they? So you don't want to overwork them. Yeah, it's a small squad as well.
So, to return to it, that's the news. Congratulations, we did it. Hugh Edwards moment. Not in that way. So yeah, things started very well with that Luke Morgan try. And then, as you mentioned, Iestyn, the Sam Parry score and the Luke Morgan follow-up at halftime. At halftime, it very much felt like a kind of fantasy land half. Like, where's this going? Can we do it from here? Iestyn, how are you feeling as you got into that halftime and you kind of saw actually they're ahead out of nowhere?
A little bit shocked. Probably because the amount of crossfield kicks the Stormers did all afternoon. That was probably the most shocking thing out of the first half. But yeah, they just took their chances really well, didn't they? And that's probably a really pleasing thing for Toby Booth. And and the battle up front was evenly matched as well. And going on to the second half when you have maybe not have the strongest of front rows to come on.
Yeah.
The likes of Garen Phillips, Ben Warren, Lewis Lloyd, all coming off the bench, all relatively young. They're going to learn from that experience of coming off the bench. Maybe not so much in terms of the scrums because it did go backwards a little bit compared to the starting front row. But you kind of felt at half time it was like they're definitely gonna try their best to go up a gear, but will they? And then you realise
Yeah.
about 4 minutes into the second half when Evan Root scored, you thought, oh, here we go. They might just turn it on. And weirdly, they didn't, which was a bit of a surprise. And shout out to Hugh Sutton for 2 ridiculously good jackal turnovers. And he would made one crucial one. I think it was right after the Stormers try as well. And that was rather important at the time. And, there's just players like that. Everyone talks about James Fender and Rhys Davis about international section. Hugh Sutton has somehow turned into a jackal freak and can play in the second row, then that would be rather astonishing. But you got like the likes of Sutton, James Ratty's been excellent over recent weeks, and obviously Morgan Morris won man of the match, and Harry Deeves was spectacular. The tackle in the first half was right at the end of the first half as well was brilliant. And you kind of just felt like maybe there's not enough praise to these players. They've gone in under the radar. You mentioned Morgan Williams there, who played very well on Saturday night. Sutton, Ratty, Owen Watkin. He might have missed a few tackles, but in terms of line speed, they blitzed up quite a lot in the middle of the field as well. This is what I found really interesting because I do sit down and watch quite a bit of rugby from time to time. And the both centres kind of just pushed up, and there was still like space out wide for the winger. So Luke Morgan maybe drift a little bit behind them, because the amount of pressure that the 2 centres would bring on. And well, JJ Englebrecht found out the hard way in his own 22 in the first half, and he tried and give that pass, which Kieran Williams was having none of, which obviously leads to the Parry try. There's things like that I just find really fascinating, but that's probably more about me being really geeky.
Oh,
but,
I'm exactly the same though. You're in good company.
But yeah, it's like, those defensive moments, as I said in the first half, and the constant pressure of the second half. I thought Adam Beard came off the bench and played rather well. Everyone has said maybe he doesn't do enough around the park, and I personally thought, was that a little bit of an error, maybe not putting him to start? But then again, if he's coming off the bench and playing 25 minutes like that, I wouldn't have thought in my wildest dreams that Adam Beard would be that much of an impact player. You kind of associate Adam Beard as someone that plays 80 minutes and continues with a lot of hard work. But I think he made a really good turnover, which didn't go his way because it was a knock on from the scrum. But it was like, you thought, oh wow, this Adam Beard, he can stay, and yeah, and there's probably more of a credit to the South African lads as well who came in on short notice. Of course, Satete got that penal penalty against him with that block, which was rather unfortunate at the time in the first half. But Boshoff came on the wing, which was interesting.
Yeah,
that was a discovery.
I love a slow winger.
And Jaydan Rudolph won a turnover before giving one away a few minutes later, which was also fascinating. But yeah, on the whole, it was a really good performance. And at halftime, we kind of thought they were going to get back into it, but there was many standouts on the Ospreys side, and they held up rather well, except for the penalty try at the end, obviously.
Yeah. But you can kind of forgive that when the game's won, as you say. I watched it with the South African commentary. And when DeAndre Rudolph came on, loved him and were just lavishing him with praise constantly. In that way that, when I don't know if yesterday you get this a lot, but like when you watch a player play it, like maybe, because he's obviously been a Curry Cup player an awful lot, he's been playing at the Cheetahs. When you're used to watching you watch a player in a Welsh Pro and they have one stormer and then they get a game for the Dragons like a year later or for whichever region, and you're like, no, this guy's great. This guy's really good quality. And I've seen him play once, but I love him and I'm going to talk about him endlessly. And it had that kind of vibe of we saw him once and they're talking about, he's a great turnover merchant. He's fantastic. Just really bigging him up. And then he wins that turnover and like, what did we tell you? What a player he is. I love that. And I thought generally, actually, South African commentators is really, really good value and really bought into this rather than it being moaning about the Bok miskicking or the Stormers having a bad game. It really felt like they were won over, as it feels kind of like the narrative's become everyone's been won over by the Ospreys an awful lot.
Yeah, I don't want to blow my own trumpet a little bit, but I was at Wales, Italy in the Six Nations, and obviously the result-wise didn't go very well for Wales. Of course. But Manuel Zuelani came on the field. And I said to the people I was working with, I'll watch out for him because there's a good chance he might win a turnover. And then obviously when Wales are on the attack, who wins the turnover? Manuel Zuelani. So that's like one of my claims to fame of being really geeky. I'm going to continue to say that story. I'm going to continue to say that story for the rest of my life, all thanks to a Benetton back rower. So I can't really complain.
But yeah, just like to just mention the defense as well. There's a moment in there's I think 2 or 3 moments in that first 20 minutes which kind of set the tone where one, they make a kind of breakaway. The Stormers win it off a turnover ball in the 22. And Watkin makes a brilliant defensive read out of nowhere, just flies up, shuts an enormous overlap down entirely, and the Stormers end up going backwards and losing the ball. And there's the other one's the Keelan Giles intercept off a cross kick, which is one of those where you can kind of point to it and it looks a bit like luck, but ultimately Giles has trusted that Kieran Williams is going to get across and make that tackle. And a lot of wingers would come in and commit and try and make the double shot and put him into touch or not trust their winger, so wait out. And instead, Giles goes, I trust my teammate to make this tackle so I can stand off and watch his support, which allows him to make that intercept, make it downfield. Stormers give away a penalty from that, from which Ospreys kick for the corner, and they score the opening try. And it's an enormous kind of 14-point turnaround, or 10-point turnaround, And I think it kind of sums this team up more than anything else, is ultimately it's trust in their teammate is what leads to that try, what leads to that interception. Dan Edwards' work on that is also, like, I think, absolutely brilliant. The way he sees it 2 phases out, that winger being committed to the line, man in the box kind of refold onto the wing, having been in the backfield, and spots that kind of runs one phase where he crashes up with Reece Henry to condense the line, then flashes around and immediately drops it on the toe, having seen what's coming, just hoping to pull the winger up. Just really smart play. And I think there's a few moments in that first 10 minutes that set a tone that they then kept up the entire way.
Do you think, Squid, that there's an element of really good coaching in there too? Because it reminds me of there was a couple of interceptions, and it reminded me of the Sale game, I think it was, where I think was both saying that he gave himself some credit for once, didn't he, and identified that the replacement scrum half had more of a lead in time with his passes, and that's where some of the interceptions came from. And there was a couple, wasn't there? There was the Keelan Giles cross kick, but then I think there was our scrum half was picked up on an interception towards the end of the game, didn't he? It didn't go to a try or anything, but he got that too. So it felt like there were quite a few sort of opportunistic moments where they'd read the play really well. And you just wonder also, it just seems like Toby Booth is a coach who really watches his tape and identifies these things. So yeah, I mean, I had to get in a glowing Toby Booth reference into that, and it felt like that a couple of times when I was watching.
Oh, more of those to come. Because I think there's another thing in that they started dropping knowing Manny LeBuck loves that cross kick, and the way the defender since Mark Jones came in as defense coach has the winger start quite narrow and then push out, and kind of trust the winger to cover an awful lot of ground, rather than starting wide and working in as the kind of more Springbok type system. And the fullback comes up an awful lot and kind of tries to cut off the space. And instead, they kind of left the fullback where they are an awful lot as to work in a normal role and tried to use the 10 more to cut off those cross kicks, allowing the winger and the fullback to do so. And so you see it for the second Luke Morgan try is Jack Walsh comes in, takes that kick perfectly because he's been dropped into the backfield early and is watching for the cross kick specifically. But you see it, there's another one in the first half with Dan Edwards, kind of doesn't get there, but he gets across and makes the tackle following it. And they're just using that 10 to watch out for, the opposite 10, watch out for one of LeBock's strength. And it turned a weakness in the defense that clearly the Stormers have gone in and gone, this team's we've got 10 who's absolutely brilliant at cross kicks. This team is quite susceptible to cross kicks. Let's do 100,000 of them per minute. And instead turned it kind of from a weakness into a strength. And yeah, I thought just brilliant attention to detail.
Yeah, and just evidence of the growth in some of the players as well. I think that so many of them, like you mentioned Jack Walsh there, and I think he deserves a mention as well, doesn't he? Because he just gets better and better, I think. And that Keelan Giles put in a really good performance. I think there's some of these players who are quite, Keelan Giles isn't too young, but lots of them are quite young. Jack Walsh only came in a couple of seasons ago, and some of these players who are young have kind of put in patchy performances towards the start of their time at the Ospreys, and have just grown into it. And this season, and particularly this game, they just looked awesome. I think Jack Walsh is looking really, really good, better game by game. He is looking like a really dangerous attacking player now, and it doesn't cause too many mistakes either. So I just think I've seen a lot of growth in particularly some of those sort of younger backs too. It's been really nice to see.
Yeah, and then there was a pretty remarkable last, basically straight 15 minutes from essentially the Harry Deves try onwards, which is again brilliantly taken, of just defending and trying to keep them out from getting that losing bonus point, which eventually did come in the final play. But I think again that last passage of defense once again characterized what this team's about. Again, the way they've improved that Morgan Morris post game gave credit to Mark Jones for the way he's helped them improve that defense and made it much more, clear and simple, and everyone knows their role in defense much more. But yeah, I thought, again, right to the final play yes, there was a try, but it was a penalty try, and they were, throwing everything at them, and they defended, they put in an awful lot of tackles in the last 10 minutes. That, yeah, I thought, again, sums the team up, sum that performance up, and some of the intensity they're able to hit up these days.
And like Iestyn said earlier, Toby Boothwood said he went straight onto the pitch and spoke to 3 players, and they're really annoyed they conceded that try despite the fact they just won away in South Africa. Just such an impressive performance. I think I'll keep talking about him. I don't care. Toby Booth said again. He said I think he called it like a typical archetypal Ospreys performance, didn't he? And it just built on hard work and just having a lot of heart. A really good aggressive forwards performance, including in defence and in the scrums. There's just such an identity to this team now, and like we've said a couple of times in this, this game, this result has really summed it up.
Yeah. Iestyn, anything else on the game?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Except for Avadi Boshov's little burst down the wing and the procedure there. That was fun. But I think that's all I got.
So this would have put us into sixth in the table, which is an insane state of being to be in with 4 weeks to go. Wouldn't have seen this coming at the start of the season. However, that losing bonus point put the Stormers level with us on 40 points, and their points difference is better. So we sit in seventh at the minute with 4 games to go, which again, if you look at, if you were to do a budget table of the URC, we are very far off being seventh, especially if you adjust for cost of living and inflation and everything else and, exchange rates. So yeah, that is an insane achievement already. And looking at the fixtures, there are 2 fixtures on there at the start of the season, I think I said on this podcast, are basically unwinnable. There's the 3 games in South Africa, Leinster away, and then kind of Connaught and Edinburgh away, kind of felt like almost unwinnable games at the start of the season. And they've gone and won a number of those already. And the ones that they didn't, Edinburgh, they were one better line out away from taking that. So it kind of feels like nothing's impossible with just a few weeks to go. But the table is unbelievably tight. There's literally 3 points separating 5th and 11th. So the kind of playoff race is insanely competitive.
If you were looking at that table going into the Stormers game, you think, okay, here's the one team that you can discount. It's the Ospreys because they got to go away to South Africa and away to Leinster. But now that's just all been torn up because of that win, and you think just anything's possible. And I saw a couple of people, I think, including you, Robbie, talking on Twitter about that Leinster game and just rubbing our hands together because you should never go to Leinster and expect it or even dare to think about a win. But
yeah,
they've got a pretty intense fixture list themselves, and you'd imagine that would be the game where they can rest some players. So obviously their squad depth is insane. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, if I had to predict it, because it's the Ospreys, we'll probably go beat the Bulls, we'll probably go beat Leinster away, and then lose to the Dragons and not get into the top 8. But let's see. I don't know.
But yeah, it's insanely tight. The URC put out a thing last week where they had, right before the games, a percentage prediction of how likely everyone is to get in, and they put the Ospreys at 17%. And I can't wait for this weekend because that is going to be different. I bet our odds won't be 17% anymore. But yeah, should the Ospreys be favourite to make the top 8? Probably not. Would I dare write us off if I was a fan of another team? It would be a huge mistake to do so, I feel.
Yeah, it's just great to see. You referenced it earlier, just that the Ospreys getting a bit of an aura back. There's
yeah.
We were having a discussion about this because you mentioned you grew up in the East Midlands. I grew up in the Southwest. I was born in Brecon, and we were talking about when we were at the Leicester game. Actually, we bumped into another sort of English raised Ospreys fan who had Welsh heritage, and there's almost there's this thing about the Ospreys, even though it's a really young brand and it didn't pick up sort of the old club brands like Cardiff or Llanelli did. There's that Galacticos era where if you're part, and I think we're a symptom of it. If you're part of the sort of Welsh diaspora, you picked it up because they're almost like the Manchester United of Welsh regional rugby, and then we had some dark times. It's kind of picking up again now, but when we were out in Gloucester, we're talking to the Gloucester fans and stuff. They're fully aware of the Ospreys brand, and you talk to them. We're a club that's 21 years old, so it's very young. But there's so much history of sort of the league wins and the players we've had. You think the Adam Wynne-Jones is, the Shane Williams is, and you're sort of chatting to them, and they're saying, "God, it's so good to have a good Ospreys team, as though we've a team that's been around for 300 years." So it's nice to have that aura back, and I definitely think you're right. We're one of the teams of the ORC this season where you just think if someone's going to do something a little bit special, it's going to be the Ospreys, isn't it? And
Yeah.
Given we've got the Bulls away, then Leinster away, and 2 derbies as well. It's a really hard task, but yeah, again, if there's someone who's going to be something a little bit special with the Ospreys, so I'm like Iestyn, I've got that natural Welsh rugby pessimism sort of bred into me throughout my life. But if any team's going to make you believe, it's going to be this one, isn't it? So let's see.
Absolutely, and so there was that kind of holy triforce of bad guys in the noughties of the Ospreys, Munster, and Leicester Tigers, who all had very similar playing styles, were the best team in Ireland, the best team in England, the best team in Wales at the time. And I've always kind of regarded them as like like a holy trinity that go together. And Leicester Tigers won the league 2 years ago. Munster won the league last year. Surely it's time. Surely it's time to pay off the third part of this. The third part of this Bad Guys Return revenge trilogy that we're getting. This legacy sequel. This like Maleficent style return for the bad guys. I don't know. I dare to dream. I dare to dream about that.
Yeah.
However,
Everyone heard Robbie's prediction. Ospreys win the league next season. Easy.
it's that or it's Munster and Leicester again, and that ain't happening. No, Leicester ain't happening, but Munster alarmingly close. They look very good, and another team that had a huge win in South Africa this weekend. Ospreys Munster final though. Who could call it? Perfect trip to Thomond Park. I've been there once before, and we got battered. Kai Evans kicked 3 penalties, and I was over the moon because it felt like the best performance of the season. Because we'd actually scored points. Peak kind of Alan Clark into the coachless era.
I wanna say that might have been Craig Casey's debut. Random fact. I think
Was
he
it?
scored off the bench. Just
That
a
sounds
really,
right.
really random fact that just come into my head. I think it genuinely was Craig Casey's debut.
I remember talking to 2 separate Munster fans that day who talked about Craig Casey and just kept comparing to Peter Stringer as though that's a good thing. But yeah, they were so excited about the thought of having another like Peter Stringer with hair. But yeah. Speaking of Munster, should we play good player?
Yes, maybe may as well. But
So
it's just the high of last weekend, so I think it has to be in store.
so let's pick up on another great away league win. The year is 2016. The date is Valentine's Day, Sunday, February 14th. And the game is Munster at Thomond Park against the Ospreys. 17-21 to the visiting team. A historic win. Again, this was just after the year where Munster were completely unbeatable at home, where the Ospreys had a run of pretty good results around there, but it was still a hell of an achievement, still a hell of a Munster team you had out there. Do you want to run through the teams, or Iestyn, what are your memories of this game?
It comes at a really weird patch because if memory serves me correct, I don't think the Ospreys played particularly well in the league. Obviously, the European run that season was, I think, might have been the Claremont.
Oh yeah, it was that year. Yeah.
Yeah. So the league was kind of like a bit of a no-brainer because the start didn't go very well, mainly because of the World Cup. And it comes at a really weird patch because there's some really big wins against Munster around this couple of year gap as well. So it's like the underrated away win in Munster that everyone kind of seems to forget, I feel. Yeah, a very young me was very happy by this result, mainly because of the try scorer with a few minutes to go.
So the Ospreys were in 9th going into this game, and it pulled them up to 7th. So yeah, it wasn't a vintage season, just the 2 Italian teams pre their renaissance and the Dragons behind us in the table. And then yeah, managed to pull us up the table a bit. Do you want to throw the Ospreys team or the Munster team first?
That's a good question because we normally do the away side, but it's an away game. It's one of those where you think, do you stick by tradition or do you break it?
Should we do the Munster team first? Should we run through?
May as well.
Okay, and build up on a high. Because the number 23 is a glorious, gorgeous player. At loose head for Munster, Dave Kilcoyne.
Yeah, solid, good player.
Yeah, dancing Dave, as he was briefly known. Mike Sherry at hooker. I just about remember.
Remember him briefly, not much as obviously
Yeah.
not as much as Dave Kilcoyne, but briefly.
If you
I
said the
don't know who
name
that is.
Mike Sherry to me, I'd go, "Oh, he played hooker for Munster," and I could give you no further information. John Ryan at tight head because it's a Munster game.
It's like tradition. You just see number 3 John Ryan in the
Yeah.
Munster team now.
Sometimes it's not him, and they just accidentally write Ryan on the back of the shirt. Number 4, Dave Foley. Again, like good servant for Munster. I think played for
Yeah,
them for a very long time.
vague
Um,
memories.
yeah. Mark Chisholm at number 5 was a former Wallaby lock who I had no memory of playing for Munster. Was there for just the one season.
Obviously, with the news of Munster and, well, Irish rugby and non-Irish qualified players, I think we should stay away from that particular topic.
Yeah, left the Wallabies, retired from Wallaby career, went to Bayonne, and then signed for Munster for a year. So there we go. Billy Holland at 6, another like big servant for Munster.
Yeah, I think the back row is all like really good servants for, well, for Munster. So it's kind of like all three of them kind of like fit the bill.
Yeah. So at number 7, we have Jack O'Donoghue, players captain Munster an awful lot. Another one slots right in there. A good player. Good player, Jack O'Donoghue. And at 8, former Cardiff and breakdancing favourite, Robin Copeland, who perhaps best remembered for doing Cardiff kit launch where he started breakdancing in the middle of Westgate Street.
I forgot about that.
I
Yeah.
was going to say you need to explain the breakdancing reference to me. I didn't get that one.
But was huge favourite at Cardiff for a while, then left to try and play for Ireland. I think he won 2 caps in the end. Had a middling.
Yeah, it was a very brief stint, wasn't it?
Yeah. Played for his country, but perhaps wasn't as successful as he could have hoped. Duncan Williams at 9, who was a rugby player.
I can't remember much of him.
Very Welsh name. I can say that about him.
Yeah. Wore a
It's an
scrum
Irish,
cap.
it's a Munster side without Conor Murray, but obviously it's a Six Nations window, so that's probably the reason why.
Yeah, that's it. I think I have a vague memory of, I think he had a really bad game here and then scored a try 10 minutes in. And you're kind of like, no, but he's having a stinker. Where's his strike coming from?
He scored. I just seen like the highlight. I saw like the first 10 seconds of the highlights, and he scores a try from a box kick, as in charged down from a box kick himself, regathers and scores.
Nice.
At 10, another great servant is Ian Keatley.
Benetton legend.
Legend.
Are we gonna rock with that?
I discovered this week is something like 6th on the all-time most minutes played in the URC. So
and he played a lot for Munster as well. So it wasn't kind of like, just by 2 different teams. He kind of like played a good chunk, then obviously went to Italy for Benetton, and there was
quite a long time.
Yeah.
I was at Connacht before that as well. Ronan O'Mahony on the wing. Completely forgotten him. The other O'Mahony, because he came through around the same time as Peter. And then one of them had a great career. And then the other one was also there. Rory Scannell at 12. He's
solid.
Yeah, solid player. Now in France. I'm trying to remember if he was the player. There was a scandal around. Can't remember. Let's move on. Francis Eyrie, good player at 13. Didn't have the best time at Munster.
I remember him tackling Keelan Giles into touch in the 2016-17 game. It was like the game before the Benetton game, which kind of derailed the season. And I remember thinking that he committed a high shot, but then looking back at it, it didn't look that bad. And I was just complaining for complaining's sake with Marius Matreya in the middle.
He's currently at Racing. He was one of those players that was very good, but then just didn't work at Munster. I know Munster fans really didn't rate him. Just didn't fit in for whatever reason. As sometimes happens, player sign for a club, it just won't work out. Darren Sweetenham on the wing.
He's a good player. Is he still out in France? I can't remember if he is.
I think so. He was. Oh god, where was he? He was playing for one of those bottom of the table URC. He's at Oyonnax. Yeah. Great player. Was he a hurler or a Gaelic football? He played to a semi-pro level, and that came up every time anyone commentated on him. And then Andrew Conway at fullback, a rare sight.
Good player, if not more.
Yeah,
very good player.
Great player, greatly underrated. Yeah. The bench, Niall Scannell, solid player. Pete McCabe, very little memory of. But number 18 is a great one. Mario Segario, the Uruguay prop, who they signed off the back of the 2015 World Cup, where he had a really solid game against Wales, where they just couldn't get anything past him. And Munster were like, "We like the cut of your jib. We'll sign you." Played one season there, then that was kind of it, and kind of retired from Uruguay duty around the same time. But good player. Connor Oliver, Shane Buckley. I don't imagine we've got any input. No. Thomas O'Leary, who's very almost a Lion, got injured a few days after the Lion squad was named in 2009, replaced by Mike Blair. Kian Bohane,
Don't remember much of him.
no memory of him. And Dave Johnson, which brings us on to the Ospreys team. And this is the main event, right? At loosehead, Nicky Smith.
Good player.
Great player. At hooker, Sam Parry.
Try scorer from last weekend, so good player.
Great player. A tight head, another one I think we've all waited to hear more of. Dimitri Arhip.
Love that. What a front row that is. That's great.
Saw him play on the weekend, so still counts as good player.
Robust, I'd call that front row.
Yeah.
Robust. Second row of Rainier Bernardo and Rory Thornton.
Rory Thornton now coaches Cardiff University because I
Does he?
briefly checked the varsity game, and
Oh.
and Swansea have won, by the way. That's why James put a message in the WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
All of a sudden the camera just pans to a Rory Thornton on the touchline. But I'm just assuming he's there as a coach. I could be completely wrong, but yeah, he was at the vicinity anyway.
Good for him, making future strides. One day, maybe we'll see him as a coach of another team. And yeah, Rainier Bernardo left for the Scarlets. Good player, decent player. He was all right. Now, this back row, 6, Joe Bierman.
Good player, solid.
Good, yeah. Underrated. 7, Sam Underhill.
Yeah, great player.
Yeah. No notes, no complaints. Yeah. And 8, another greatly underrated player, Dan Baker.
Great player. Yeah. Once got mistook for him in a pub, so
I can see it. I can see it.
Yeah. So I've always had a soft spot for him, and very good player too, isn't he?
He was sat near me before the Munster game the other week, and yeah, he's still massive. that hasn't changed. Brendan Leonard at 9. Can you hear the people singing the song of Angry Men? And Sam Davis at 10.
I can't remember if Sam Davis won man of the match or not that night. I want to say he did because of his points display.
Yeah,
I'm just going to give it to him.
Penalties. Yeah,
it was the Sky Sports era, so they were probably just talking about his left foot that was kissed by God.
Oh, they definitely gave it to him then. I don't know why I questioned it.
Scored a try, a conversion, and 3 penalties. So yeah, you're calling him man of the match. We're calling him man of the match. Definitive man of the match performance. Centers, Josh Matavesi at 12, and a great player. And at 13, the man of the hour, the main event, the reason we're covering this, JJ Englebrecht, former Bull and former Stormer, so incredibly relevant this week, and also former Osprey.
I think this is like his only win against for the Ospreys.
Yeah,
because they had a draw and then defeats, and then obviously this win. Because an exclusive from the WhatsApp group chat that we were thinking of doing either him or Johnny Coetzee.
Yeah.
And turns out from the 4 appearances that Johnny Coetzee played, the Ospreys didn't win a game, despite him scoring 2 tries away at Poe in the Challenge Cup. So I believe this is like the only game that JJ Englebrecht played and won. And he played the full 80 as well.
JJ Englebrecht's only full 80 for the Ospreys. He'd come off the bench in a draw against Glasgow the week before. 20-all draw.
I was there for that game.
Oh, man.
Serves me correct.
I remember him picking like a good line in that game towards the end.
Fair play,
Yeah.
good memory. I cannot remember 2 months ago. It's 8 years
But
ago.
this is I can't remember anything else in life, but I
Yeah.
have intimate memories of certain Ospreys games.
And
I've said
certain
this
lines
before.
people run. Yes.
Yeah,
By
that's it.
JJ
But like,
Englebrecht.
I'll have one memory of like I'll remember every game between about 2008 and like 2012 in vivid detail, and then games between then and now, I will remember one thing per game, and that's the way my memory's gone. Um, so other wing on the wings, you had Ben John, great player.
Good
Uh,
content creator as well.
yeah, great content creator, really lovely guy, really like Ben. Yeah, great guy. The rugby trainer, if you're curious.
Ah,
Um, and Tom Grabham on the other wing.
Yeah, there's a lot of scrum halves in this Ospreys side. I've just realised looking at the squad.
Oh God, you're right. You're right. It's like nothing but scrum halves.
Did we not do wingers at this stage? Like I remember quite a lot of this time period, but did we not do wingers?
Yeah, there's not a single winger in this team. You've got a centre and a scrum half on the wings. And at fullback, all together now, it was an Ospreys game between about 2012 and what about last week? Altogether, Dan
Dan
Evans.
Evans. Good
Couldn't be
player.
anyone else. Great player.
And in fitting with this team, has a bit of the attitude of a scrum half as well, I think. I really rated him. It's a shame he dropped off a bit towards the end, but there was a time where he was just really, really good. So definitely a good player.
This was like peak complain he wasn't playing for Wales
Yeah.
period.
And I was making those complaints too. I thought it was awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. His infamous just trying to figure things out tweets. Where he tweeted like after a Wales squad was named without him in it, he tweeted a photo of like a guy at a chalkboard stroking his chin. It was just the caption trying to figure things out. And it's forever defined Dan Evans in my mind. Bench, Scott Otten, great player.
One of the very good at chip and chase as well.
This is an
So
awesome bench.
Was
I'm
that-
sorry for the spoilers, but yeah, look at the names here. This is a great bench.
Was this? No, this wasn't the chip and chase Scott Otten game, was it? Because that was away in
No.
Munster.
yeah, that was the playoff semi final.
Yeah.
23-3 and scored 2 disallowed tries. That was weird. Very
Yeah.
weird.
That last minute Matt Vasey one that
No,
still
that's the semi final
that's
before.
the semi.
There's a lot of games against Munster in this time period. I've mentioned
I
it
know.
before. But I think there's probably too many.
They all blur into one after a
There's
while.
a lot that stick in my head. In an alternative universe, there's like 5 games going on, and Josh Matavesi's try at the end probably stands in all 5 of them.
Apart from the one where it happened.
Yeah.
So Scott On walked past me and James before the Gloucester game. We kind of had like he turned to me and was like, "Is that Scott On?" And we're like, "Yeah, that's Scott On." Which I bet he doesn't get a lot of, but you put him in that particular environment, and it was like, "Oh my god, it's Scott On." Gareth Thomas, 4th choice loose head on the bench,
Great player.
Yeah, good player.
and Marfu Fia, who there are all sorts of stories about. Not a great scrummager, but a fun player.
Yeah, he scored a brace against Racing in Europe once. That happened. So good player.
Good player. A young Adam Beard on the bench.
Years
Who-
before British and Irish Lion Adam Beard as well.
Yeah.
This is a
Where
long
would this-
time ago.
This was his second game for the Ospreys.
Oh, wow.
Made his debut against Glasgow off the bench the week before. And then, yeah, playing his second game. Played 11 minutes there, 10 minutes here.
Great player.
Yeah. Went on to win his first cap against Samoa a year later. So, yeah, real start of something to come. He's been playing for the under-20s. That was the year of him being
Yeah,
in the
that was
under-20s.
the Grand Slam.
Grand Slam with him
Yeah.
and Owen Watkin, who's also on the bench. Spoilers. So Ollie Cracknell, then, who a player still playing at Leicester.
Good player.
Reece
One
Webb,
of my friends is a massive Ollie Cracknell fan, so I'll say it for him.
Really?
Good player. Yeah, yeah.
I will not argue, even if I don't agree. Reece Webb, again, club legend. Right before he went to Toulon.
This was I think he came back from injury at this point as well. Was it?
Wait.
Oh, this was his first game
No.
back before the after the Italy World Cup warm-up where he ruled himself out of the World
Oh,
Cup. This was his first game back, I think.
that. Oh yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Oh no, that's cursed energy to it.
Oh, that's got a lot of bad memories. I remember watching that Italy game. Just losing Halfpenny, then losing Webb. You're thinking, oh no.
Then got called up mid-tournament by Wales.
Yeah,
Came on
this
the
is like
bench
his
against England.
literally his cameo. And
Yeah.
that's what came of it.
God, I remember when Gatland used to do that all the time, where he'd call someone up mid-tournament if they came back from injury. Well, the same thing happened with Mike Phillips a few years before that. Wow. Um, and then the aforementioned Owen Watkin, who again coming straight out of under-20s, very, very young Owen Watkin. Oh no, this was no, sorry, this wasn't his debut. His debut was the other game against Munster that season. So you're looking at his fifth game for the Ospreys. So again, really early on in, out of the 100+ he's played now, that you've kind of got on the bench the start of who are now our senior players.
Yeah, you can really see it, can't you?
And then number 23, the man, the myth, the Haberfield, the greatest Osprey of all time, the best we've ever had, the greatest scrum half Wales never had, and the biggest mistake Warren Gatland has made in his life, not capping that man.
Yeah,
I
it's
think that's a
really
good player.
weird. It's a good player, but it's really weird because there's a home game against Worcester that really sticks out from the Challenge Cup, and Haberfield puts in a box kick when Osprey supporters were complaining about too much kicking during the Alan Clark era, and Haberfield puts this really good box kick in with about a minute to go. And I don't know, it's just weird seeing him and Watkin next to each other because Watkin commits a high tackle, which gives Worcester a penalty. They kick down the field, nail the drop goal, and everyone blamed Tom Haberfield for it, who
Wow.
did nothing wrong. just just by box kicking, and he
The
somehow
good
got
kick.
blamed for it.
So the Ospreys won 17-21. Sam Davis, well, there's a couple of early scores for Munster. Sam Davis try, then slowly kick them into control with a Owen Watkins scoring his first try for the Ospreys on the hour mark before, late Sam Davis penalty to put them kind of in control, having been 1 point ahead. And a memorable, historic win, mostly memorable for JJ Englebrecht 1 week after hitting that one line. But a week before, we now play his former team, the Bulls. That is the smoothest segue. This is why I am a professional content person. So, obviously, last week was a really great win. Going into it, I think we were all expecting a pretty torrid afternoon. How are we feeling heading into another game in South Africa against another team right at the top of the table?
Do you want to go first, Iestyn?
I'll try. I think it's going to be quite tough. I think that's like the nature of things when you go to South Africa. Whichever team you're going to come up against is going to be tough. And obviously, from the two games, well, the Lions game wasn't so much because that ended in a 10-point win in January, but they're all relatively close. So I think this is going to be another tough ask. I think the Pack are gonna really have a big challenge. If Akker van der Merwe's starting, then he'd probably score some point because he's very good at that for some reason. And
It's in the genes, the try scoring
yeah,
genes.
yeah, and
Van der Merwe's.
it'll be Jack Walsh. Well, whoever's a fullback, probably Max Nagy against Willie Leroux. What more do you want? And yeah, maybe a Kurt Leon Aronson involved somewhere. That will be quite intriguing to see what team the Bulls actually put out. Because obviously there's been a lot of discussion about the side they put out against Northampton in Europe. And then obviously they reverted back to type last week and lost to Munster. So they're going to be a little bit angry, I think. So it's going to be really interesting to see what team they do put out. Will it be a bit of a mix and match, or will they just go fully loaded, trying to correct their mistakes from last week? And if they do go fully loaded, it's going to be a really tough test, especially on a Saturday afternoon out in Pretoria, when it's probably going to be a little bit sunny and a little bit warm, and I don't think many people will want that at all.
Harry?
Yes, we've talked about the Welsh rugby pessimism a couple of times in this. I kind of want to push against it, but so there's two ways you can go with this. What one is you say, can this the plucky South Africans finally get a win against the mighty Ospreys this season? The other way, which comes much more naturally to me, like Iestyn, is I don't feel confident. What keeps coming to my mind is that when was it that I'm not sure what the rules on swearing are on this show, but Warren Gatland did a bit of shithousing against England that time, didn't he? Where England smashed South Africa in that New Zealand in that World Cup, right before they had the final against South Africa. And he says sometimes teams just play their final and they can't, get ready for it the next week. When
Yeah.
sometimes when you have that, and ever since he was proved right, it was such a funny thing to say because there was no need to say it. But there was it's come back to me again and again throughout the years because you just see it happen all the time. I felt a bit of it when, against Gloucester, to be honest, when we beat Sale, there's a lot
Yeah.
of emotion, a lot of energy. And then you go to Gloucester and as much as they tried really hard, some of the parts of the performance felt a bit undercooked. And sometimes you just feel like, can you maintain that intensity week after week? So if they can go and beat the Stormers and then go and beat the Bulls away in South Africa, it's just an unbelievable achievement. I know it's only a 2-game tour, but to go and do a season undefeated against South Africans and do a little undefeated tour in South Africa and then go to Dublin is just would be a huge achievement. But the pessimism just comes through to me. I think like we said earlier, if there's any team you want to believe in, it's this Osprey side, but it's just such a hard thing to do. 3 p.m. kickoff in South Africa. Like Iestyn said, the sun's out. You've had a big game the week before. I think the smart money is on the Bulls, isn't it? But you just never
Yeah.
know. And I'm certainly not going to be betting on them because who knows? But I will default to my pessimism and hope to be proved wrong.
That's it. I think that worry starts to set in, doesn't it? That was that a final being played, them kind of getting over the Gloucester game by having a huge performance. And in the same way, we saw them have a huge performance against the Lions after a really disappointing loss against Munster, game they really targeted. And I worry about that as well. That's in my head. But also, there's a bit of me that does feel like that performance against the Stormers feels more repeatable than the one against Sale, where they kind of just raise their intensity rather than it feeling like a kind of be all and end all, like everything has to go perfectly game. And I would feel like the biggest optimist in the world if I predicted another win, especially another bonus point win, because that was beyond the wildest dreams last week. But I think there's a chance in which we can go and get points out of this and get points on the table from this game. And that feels more like the target, right? If you'd, before this tour, said we'll get 6 points or 7 points out of this, would have bitten your hand off, would have even for 5, So if they can just claim any points, add anything to that total, add anything to that table, and hope a couple of other results go our way, Cardiff can beat Edinburgh, things can start to fall there, and then target those last 3 games a bit more. That'd be huge. The one other factor that's worth talking about, because it'll probably be the big one in the lead up, is Dewi Lake. It should be, fingers crossed, fit and available again, which could be a huge boost on the bench. Having someone of his kind of power, experience, and try scoring ability to come on, potentially replacing Sam Parry, who is, the try scoring monster himself, or Lewis Lloyd, who I thought was absolutely fantastic when he came on at the weekend as well. Like the rate he gets off the line defensively is amazing. But yeah, there's outside chance of Jack Morgan. Looks like it's not going to be the case. But yeah, Dewi Lake would be a huge, huge figure to come back as well.
Yeah, and that adds a bit of momentum, doesn't it? And momentum is such a thing in professional sport. I think you always see it with Wales when we we got England in the first game, we win. It kind of carries us through a little bit. And so it's just that inherent pessimism to say we've just won a game. That means we must lose a game. But momentum is something in professional sport. And if you've got Dewey Lake coming back, do we have did I see Tipperick is he
He's over
potentially
there.
fit
Yeah,
for
he's
it?
over
Yeah,
there.
okay, yeah. So I mean that's an unbelievable bench, isn't it? It's if you were to put those two in on the bench, but. So yeah, and that could freshen up the squad a little bit, especially if it's been a long season and they don't have much rotation ability and they just put in a good performance. So having players like that back is just such a massive advantage, especially when the squad is presumably in a good place mentally as well from having that momentum.
Yeah. Do you want a stat as well, by the way?
Yes.
So the Ospreys and the Bulls are the two teams in the URC this season who statistically take the most of their chances in the opposition 22. The two most clinical sides in the competition. So we might see a reasonably high scoring game, which the Bulls are number 1, the Ospreys are number 2, which is an incredible feat from where they were a year or so ago. To have just tightened up so much of that kind of detail in the opposition 22. But yeah, that's quite exciting. The Bulls are on a bit of a losing streak as well at the minute. They battered Lyon, who sent over a second team, and they beat the Dragons a few games back in the mid Six Nations period. But otherwise, they've lost 3 of their last 4. Obviously, one was that infamous Northampton game. But yeah, lost at home to Munster, lost away to Leinster. It's, I don't know. You talk about momentum and you talk about belief, and there's perhaps momentum heading in opposite directions here. Even if the Bulls, as you said, the smart money should be on the Bulls and they should go in as favourites. But I don't think it's a done deal by any account. And yeah, the target's got to be points and see if you can kick on from there and perhaps aim any more, score any more.
Yeah, and you just do not want to be undercooked or not a top gear against this Osprey side, do you? Because you saw that intensity against the Stormers last week. It's just if a team turns up, if the Bulls aren't in their best place, I think this Ospreys team will punish you. And that stat is amazing, by the way, isn't it? The Ospreys compared to where we were, it was a couple of seasons ago, even the Booth era, it just felt like it was the scrum's really good, but we can't take our opportunities. And to say we're the best in the league now at doing that, I just think it's such a clinical side that if the Bulls do turn up a bit undercooked, and I think there's probably where we've benefited this season is maybe teams like the Stormers potentially last week not taking us seriously enough. I think, like Booth said, we've earned that respect now. We've got it. So hopefully the Bulls do take us seriously. But if they are undercooked, if their confidence is low, I think the Ospreys are a team who have that intensity to punish them for it. So you never know. Maybe I'm talking myself into some confidence here.
Yeah, it's a really weird one, isn't it? Because you look at the results. Obviously, the Bulls losing and the Ospreys winning against the Stormers, and you kind of think, well, maybe a little bit of momentum here and there would, it could mean another away win, and it would be ridiculously impressive if it would be another away win. But you kind of always got that sense that the Bulls will fight back, and it feels like back-to-back home defeats. It kind of just doesn't sit right with any South African side, really. Especially, the bigger sides who are always there or thereabouts in the latter stage of the ORC. And, and obviously the Bulls lost heavily against Leinster a couple of weeks before as well, which was quite a bit of a shock because everyone was building it up as, the big game of the weekend. And whilst Leon Aronson scored a really good try, that was kind of it. So it's a game that you might look at it thinking, Ospreys got a little bit of form. Bulls, got the odd win here and there of their last few games, but you kind of feel like it's still evenly matched between two sides that, like Robbie just said, are really, really clinical. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. The Bulls running beyond this is Glasgow and Benetton at home, then Sharks away. So it's 4 games here that are really winnable for them. So maybe they don't view this as the must win, but also off the back of last week, which, I think they were fairly upfront, Jake White, in wanting to get some daylight in the playoff places, Munster being the other team chasing that kind of 3rd and 4th spot, that they slipped up on that and they want a home place. And they're now only 4 points ahead of Benetton. So yeah, they're probably really going for this. We're probably going to be really going for this, knowing, that it's ridiculously tight. We're only 1 point place ahead of 11th, despite being in 7th. But also, only 6 points behind 4th. So stupidly tight at the top of the league. But yeah, I think there's reason to believe, and there's something to kind of hang on to.
Yeah, in Booth we trust.
In Booth we trust. To very quickly, I guess we're probably looking at a fairly similar team. We mentioned Dewi Lake coming back in. We mentioned Justin Tibrick might come back in. Who plays 10 is potentially a question if Dan Edwards is fit, if Owen Williams has travelled, or do we just stick with Jack Walsh, who played very well in the second half? And then does Nagy stay at fullback, or does Walsh perhaps slot in there?
There's also the Gareth Thomas is up there as well, so
Of course.
maybe bring in some international experience into the front row. I kind of like the prospect of having him start and then having Nicky Smith for just power on the bench, and knowing Toby Booth, they probably switch that round and start with Nicky Smith and have Gareth Thomas on the bench. But it's nice to have that international that's had a week off in a way, and it's given experience to someone like Garen Phillips. 10's an interesting one, like you mentioned. If Edwards is fit and able to play, I think it's another really good opportunity for him, and to really see another game out in South Africa, and maybe have Walsh on the bench again, because I thought the impact he brought off last week was very good, and I think Max Nagy deserves another shot at a fullback, not because he tried to nail a drop goal after 10 seconds
yes,
last week, which was rather spectacular. But
if he'd got it, they would have got the leading bonus point.
Yeah, well, if you look at it that way, if you take away the yellow card as well that he got at the other end of the game, it's quite a comfortable away win. But nothing on that. But yeah, it's another game for him to not away get back to speed. I think he's done that now. He's obviously come off the bench against Munster, against the Lions, obviously played the full 80 against the Stormers. So it's, been more opportunity to gain that consistent form that we saw of him at the start of the year. Because at the start of the season, he's probably one of the better players in Wales. There's a lot of talk about him, if he was Welsh qualified or not, and there probably still is somewhere. And obviously that injury away at Benetton was a bit of a killer at the time. Yeah. Especially as he scored about 5 minutes beforehand. But it's nice to see him back and playing consistently again.
Yeah.
And one thing that stands out to me is that all those names are so good. You just say Gareth Thomas, Nicky Smith, Max Nagy, Jack Walsh, Dan Edwards, Owen Williams. Like that, there's no player there. If I saw them on the team sheet, I'd be like, oh no, they're on the team sheet. It's crazy that we're with the budgets where they are, that we have this amount of selection, this amount of sort of choice, and that. And any way we pick them or rotate them is it's just going to end up in a good side. Like I love the idea of the Nicky Smith going to South Africa with a bomb squad of our own and bringing on Nicky Smith from the bench as an impact player. It's I think part of it is just going to depend on where the players are in terms of their bodies, isn't it? Like when we talk about this what Toby Booth's big thing, isn't it? About not maybe having the player rotation you need and having to be really careful about who plays when, who gets game time. So. Because all those players are so good and we just know they can do a job, I think part of it's just going to depend on those conversations with just how you're feeling and how you're holding up and who's feeling the freshest as well.
Yeah. And it's amazing you mentioning that depth. So many of these players were unknowns at the start of the season. And I made this point before, but like Dan Edwards hadn't played a game of professional rugby. Luke Davis hadn't started a game of professional rugby. Jack Walsh had played a handful of games last year. Harry Deves has played more games this season than he had in his professional career before. Like he'd played 13 games for the Ospreys, including appearances off the bench going into this season, and has played 18 games so far this year. It's just like the number of players in this side. Lewis Lloyd, again, hadn't played a game of professional rugby. Morgan Morse, if he comes in, again, hadn't played a game of professional rugby at the start of the year. Ben Warren had maybe 3 appearances. Just throughout the team, there are so many players who have been built over the season into proper seasoned players. And yeah, really exciting to see that depth coming through. Really exciting for what they can do in the coming years, but also very much this weekend. So, Iestyn, thank you as ever. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving us your time in your deadline week. Godspeed with that. Harry, thank you for joining us. Thank you for stepping in.
Yeah, no problem. Great to be here, and yeah, good luck, Iestyn.
Thank you. I'll take all the welcome support because tomorrow's going to be rather interesting. I think I might just sit in front of my laptop for the most of the day. Might maybe just think about 5 meter tap and goes briefly. might be more on that soon somewhere. But yeah, it's probably a better time to park that aside and focus on the university studies for a little bit.
I'll tell you what, the good player game would have been right when I was doing my dissertation. It would have been right in that period. Yeah, that was absolute peak sheer panic
Yeah,
time.
I've got another year to go as well, so good players going to come in serious amount of times next year. I'm sure of it.
All right, that's brilliant. Also, all the best to James and his partner Bex, who's I believe expecting tomorrow or in the coming days. So again, all the good luck and God bless us sent to Iestyn. Double that there. I can only, imagine. So excited, so proud. But yeah, all the best. Thank you for listening. 2 p.m. kickoff this weekend, and we'll see you there, and we'll see you next week for more of the. I automatically start doing the Squid Rugby video signing end off thing. That isn't how we end this, is it? I don't end it by just going rugby. My brain's been broken by 6 years of doing this, 6.5 now. Jeez, how is this? How have I been doing? I've lost track of who I am.
It weirdly stuck in my head as well because you were about to say more, and I thought, oh, please say rugby at the end of this. I thought it's going to happen. But yeah, it's kind of somehow got into my head as well. But carry
It's
on.
just there. It's just there. I say it all the time. It's broken me. But more rugby.